Welcome to Washington in Focus. I am Jeremy Lott. Joining me today is the Center Square's investigative reporter, TJ Martinelli. A Washington state proposal to create an independent prosecutor office for police use of deadly force incidents has drawn controversy for placing it within the state attorney general's office. Well, some opponents of House Bill 1579 say they're in favor of shifting prosecution decisions for deadly use of force incidents away from local prosecutors to an independent state agency. They argue that having it within the state attorney general's office creates a conflict of interest. TJ, that's how your article begins. Let's lead us through the ins and outs of this twisted path.
Yeah, so right now, the local county prosecutors yet to decide whether to file criminal charges against a police officer involved in these use of force incidents. And basically the process or the criteria or how they come to that decision, the discretion to file charges, means it can range widely by different counties. So the same case might get you as an officer being charged in, say, King County, but not in Snohomish County or Pierce County. And so what this bill does is creates a independent prosecuting office within the state attorney general's office. Currently, there's the Office of Independent Investigation that investigates deadly use of force incidents. They haven't yet to hire prosecutors for that office, or not prosecutors, investigators, but it doesn't have the authority to prosecute. So it can investigate, but it can't prosecute. And so what 1579 does is it adds that separate piece of the package of, police use of force reform.
And this seems to be part of a broader. You've chronicled this in quite a few articles for us. There are quite a few bills pending before, and you don't have to talk about all of them, but give us a general take on. There are a lot of bills that seem to be trying to give the Attorney General's office a lot of power in this legislative session. So can you talk a little bit about what's happening in broad scope?
Yeah, definitely. So right now, the AG's office is looking at developing a public database that all police agencies, whenever there's a use of force incident, they have to file a report to this database. It would be public. You'd be able to download all the information. What's interesting about it is, as part of their proposal, the Office of Independent Investigation would co-manage the database, and they would apparently have access to things that the public wouldn't, such as the names of the officers. And so OII would have access to this information so that they could conduct investigations. And then they could also, under this bill, 1579, they would send their report to the county prosecutor. What's interesting about this bill is it presumes that there's an inherent conflict of interest for a county prosecutor, which under current existing law, if a county prosecutor finds that there is a conflict of interest, they can choose their own separate counsel to investigate. But under this, it would get sent immediately to this independent investigative or prosecuting office. The interesting part also about that is the counsels for that office would be selected by the state attorney general. So they would get to choose who is part of a, perceived to be an independent prosecuting office. And this is something that critics have noted, is that that's a bit of a conflict of interest, seeing that the AG's office is also handling this public use of force database.
Are there any other sort of concentrating measures that the legislature is considering? Yeah,
there's also another one that would expand the state attorney general's authority to go after local police agencies. So this would that bill is House Bill 1445, but that one wouldn't concern officers specifically. It would concern local police agencies.
Yeah, it's specifically local. It's not like the state troopers. That the bill wouldn't allow them to do that. It'd be like Auburn police could get done by the attorney general's office if they didn't like something.
Yeah, and the other interesting part of it is that the threshold for being able to file civil action is much lower than with the federal government, where there has to be a pattern or practice. So in other words, repeated instances of behavior of civil rights violations, whereas under House Bill 1445, there'd only have to be one incident for them to file a civil action. And what it would also do is it would provide funding for them to hire, I believe, up to 11 employees, or I guess prosecutors for this. And they would anticipate getting hundreds of complaints every single year. So essentially, people could file complaints with the AG's office about the civil rights violations. They'd be able to investigate it, and they are expecting to file, numerous civil actions every single year.
We will be, watching the progress of these bills as they go through the legislature and, see what happens and how they get amended. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For TJ Martinelli, this is Jeremy Lott. Please subscribe and thank you for listening.
Freedom and liberty are important to all of us. If you're looking for civil, intellectual conversations with those shaping the future of freedom, try the Future of Freedom podcast with me, Scott Bertram. We speak with leaders across the country in the greater conservative and libertarian movements. In-depth conversations about where the next intellectual battles will happen across the country. It's the Future of Freedom podcast. Find it at americastalking.com or wherever you get your podcasts.